Does anybody have it? This could take a while, people. Get comfortable. If you need to go get teas, coffees, anything like that, I'd do it.
She's like, okay, I'm bored with this.
Yeah. Hello again. Welcome to another episode of On the Record, Life Sciences Edition. Delighted to be joined again, Peyton. Good to see you, mate. How are you?
I'm doing well, sir. How are you?
Yeah, not bad. Can't complain. You don't want me to either, to be perfectly honest.
Hey, looking forward to some more quality time.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it's a good point, isn't it? Because obviously last time we talked about what we would kind of describe as a digital asset reality, and moreover, how they fit into kind of full asset lifecycle management. We came off that call and thought, there was a whole lot more we could have packed into that conversation, right? So we thought this is another good opportunity to kind of delve into that topic in general. So, and I know you're particularly passionate about kind of organizations being able to set themselves up for success moving forward. I think that really starts at kind of the CapEx stage, doesn't it, of an asset's life cycle. So did you want to kind of share some thoughts on that to get us going?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's been kind of a fun journey. It's just navigating it over the years, and it's kind of nice to see it shift to that early phase of the life cycle, right? And really kind of planning for success and just sort of inheriting something, right? So we typically see organizations you just hand this package over, you turn over your commission, and you run. So really thinking through that initial phase a little bit more, and planning and knowing how do you get there, instead of just kind of falling into something, So I think engaging your whole organization earlier in the life cycle, from the standpoint of going all the way back to what do I need to replace. You and I kind of talked a little bit offline about there's different types of capital projects too, right? There's just kind of upfitting a line and adding some new equipment. There's entire new buildings with whole new processes and new feeds. So kind of tackling both of those aspects and having tools that are versatile enough to kind of feed you through that life cycle and the processes that we can just add a new line, or we can add an entire new building, with multiple lines of processes. So kind of helping our customers get through that process. So today we'll just kind of take some examples and talk through example of maybe a new building, kind of feeding it through and having the right tools in place. And it also kind of feeds into a conversation between how EPCs hand off data to the owners of the organization. So how do we make sure we're getting the right data? How do we make sure it's in the right format? How do we feed that into the system? So there's so many different directions we can kind of go with these conversations and tools. So I'm looking forward to kind of unpacking that a little bit with you.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. And it always, I find it remarkable every time that I'm speaking to an organization and they're talking about, the data that they are either inheriting or creating, right, as these assets are constructed and commissioned and validated, of course, quite often. But the bit that always strikes me as a missed opportunity in some ways is that they've got all of this fantastic information that's been handed over. Some of it obviously, sits in kind of lots of different formats and PDFs and you name it, but also in terms of models and visuals and diagrams and you name it. And again, there never seems to be kind of a joined up, well, look, how do we kind of keep all of this information in a particular standard that is available to the people within the organization that need it at the point they need it, right? And I know we're starting to see a bit of a shift now, a bit of a change where organizations are trying to create these kind of digital threads, single panes of glasses, whatever we want to term them as, right? But yeah, it always strikes me as an enormous missed opportunity that we've got all these data silos.
And I really see organizations struggle with that. I've personally worked with 2 of the top 5 pharma in the world. When you're working with companies like and kind of digging in a little bit, we've in my past career, my organization really, we spent a lot of time and effort and put a lot of resources on the ground, kind of helping, these organizations make sure that turnover package was good, right? Because sometimes you're not getting what you need, to your point, and it's not in the right format. Or, when you look at things like having that master asset data list, and it is it formatted right? Is it structured right? Is it going to come over right? How do I feed that into my EAM application? How does that data kind of handle? Do I have all the BOMs? Are they right? What's critical? What's not critical? What kind of PMs are in place? Do I get any PMs at all? Your manufacturing PMs are just that. They're built for a generic case deployment of an asset, right? They're not specific to your criteria, your environment, your conditions, what you're pumping. So just having the right process, people, and tools in place to get the data right, to move the data through the systems, to hand it over and kind of feed through the process to enable you to be successful.
Yeah, 100%. And speaking of companies, we've seen actually how expensive incomplete information can be, right? Not just in terms of actual physical cost to try and acquire that data, but time as well, and obviously the impact of not having it and how that can have an impact on the operations moving forward. So it is something that doesn't get overlooked entirely, but perhaps doesn't get considered as deeply as it should, right? I think that's something that we see.
Yep. Nope. Absolutely. And again, that underlying infrastructure or digital backbone to support it, right? I mean, we're talking a lot about the process, but the tools really are important. I mean, I try not to get too long honed in on the tools and the portfolio and the solutions, but they are very important because they do facilitate that transfer of data and that process through the whole thing. And it really has to navigate and push everything from, there's so many different pieces, and having the correct portfolio that integrates seamlessly across that life cycle to navigate it, as we kind of talked about. How do I keep things standardized? How do I share how do I know what I need to share, when I need to share it? How does that get represented digitally, in a digital twin, or in that component from a standpoint of drawings, real-time information, work being performed, configuration data, the commissioning data. How do I tie all that data through the asset is a challenge.
100%. And again, I think that obviously leads into a topic that you and I typically get quite passionate about when we're speaking to these organizations, right? Which is around centralizing that asset management and those asset management information systems, because I mean, we talked about this quite a bit on the last episode as well, right? Those silos are costing money, right? And I think that's I don't think we can avoid that, and not only costing money, but also introducing risk, right? In many ways, whether it's from a compliance and quality standpoint, or operationally in some cases, right? We've seen those organizations that some of them we mentioned, right? Where when they don't get that centralized asset management strategy right, when the folks on the ground don't have the good information and the data that they need about, like you say, what assets have been constructed and commissioned and where they are, and what their dependencies are and the systems that they're part of, and whether they're at height or whether they're etc. It can have real world impacts and real world considerations to make for these organizations. And I guess perhaps that's something that, again, we like to see, is when the organizations, particularly, if we are talking about global, sometimes it's a little bit easier if you're a smaller organization, you've only got a site or two to manage. But I mean, you've seen it across your career, right? About how, like I say, top 10, big five, major pharma global players, how they centralize this across their fleets of facilities around the world, right?
Totally. And everybody struggles, right? It's one thing I've learned through doing this forever is nobody's got it all together, right? Yeah. And that's kind of the key, is finding out where you're weak, and let's bolster that. Let's put some supports in there. Let's put the right processes in place and make sure those systems are talking correctly to pull it. But different challenges with different levels of complexity, right? When you're a little smaller, sometimes it's more of a financial challenge. You don't need as robust a system tool set maybe, but then you've got less capital to work with to put it into place. And when you're large, you've got all the complexity. So you may have the money, but now the complexity is scaled exponentially. So it's a little bit of a different challenge and different approach. So that's where, I like to come in and work to do that. But, again, at that beginning, just kind of pulling us back, kind of focusing around the beginning of the life cycle here, is just the significance of getting it right up front and preparing yourself for success, right? So, our kind of conversation today, we're talking about early in the life cycle, and I think it's very important to navigate that transition from design, installation, and commissioning over to operations, and making sure that the tools do work together and give you that good representation of that as built, and how that facility is actually running and set up, and making sure that hierarchy is configured for success, so that you can manage performance and cost, and how these different individual components and aspects of your hierarchy tie together, and how we transfer that performance across the hierarchy to be successful as we go through and hand off a full package to operations to prepare them for success.
100%. And I think, you touched on another point there that, again, perhaps organizations don't necessarily recognize that they need to plan for, like I say, as they grow and scale, they need digital tools, right, that grow and scale and are flexible enough to meet that ever-changing complexity and regulatory need, right? And I think quite often we see that. And again, that's probably, I've certainly seen cases of this, right, where actually that's almost contributed towards the kind of the siloed information systems, because they built technology, or they deployed technology that solved the problem of the day, and they didn't really have that kind of forward view to say, well, actually, that's fine for this kind of one process line, but like I'm about to go and build 2 more buildings on my facility, or a whole new plant or whatever. Actually, the tool I built was only good for this. I need something that's going to scale and grow, right? Because otherwise you're then left with the question, well, what do I do with this kind of little silo over here when actually, like say, the rest of the plant's perhaps going into somewhere else. So
Absolutely.
Really interesting topic.
Yep, and having the right things in place, not just something in place, right?
Yeah.
I've seen so many organizations where you get ready to hand it over to production, and it's like, oh, compliance says I have to have a PM.
Yeah.
No, I don't have to have a PM. I have to have the right PM with the right tools, knowing what my critical parts are, knowing what the right frequency is, and knowing if that asset's critical enough that I need predictive technologies on it and I need to get prescriptive around it, or if I just need to run it to fail. I don't need a PM. I need to understand what that asset is doing in my plant, in my facility, and in my line. So just making sure that, you just set people up for failure. You start off doing the wrong things at the wrong time just because you had to have something in place. Let's do it right. So. Yep.
Good. Well, another interesting.
We're out of time again.
I know.
Can't get too deep.
Yep. We need about 100 of these to really get to get into all of it, right? So, but yeah, look forward to catching up on the next one.
Yep.
So yeah, no, thanks for your time.
We'll hit you guys on the next one. Let us know what you want to talk about. Let us know what you think about the challenges of what you're seeing, and if this resonates or makes sense with everyone here. Be interested to hear your feedback and maybe how we steer future conversations. So look forward to the next time.
Spot on. Thanks all.
Thanks.